Hello everyone, and here we are back for the fourth video of the Tamerlane chess series. Sorry for my absence for so long making a video. Since my first three videos, some questions have come up regarding the game of Tamerlane chess, both here on the YouTube channel and also in Chess Club, regarding things maybe I either didn't cover in the rules in the first three videos, or things that I covered only very briefly, and some people had some more detailed questions about them. If we remember, this piece here is the pawn of pawns. It starts here on the pawn of pawn squares and moves forward. When the pawn of pawns, I won't rehash the entire promotion rules for this piece, but we remember that the pawn of pawns, when he reaches the far side of the board, he becomes immune in that square, and then on a subsequent turn, as soon as a situation arrives where he can either fork an opponent's two pieces, or if the opponent has a piece which is stuck somewhere on a square immobile, then immediately this piece is bound to come and attack a fork, where he can fork two of the opponent's pieces, such as in this case here. And he must do that. That's not a choice. As soon as a forking situation arises, or a situation arises where one of his opponent's pieces is immobile, he must do this. So the question arrives, what if you have a situation where here you have, say, a person has their rook, their opponent has the rook over here, and he slides it over here, and now the rook and the talia, which is a piece that moves diagonally at least two squares, these two pieces, as we can see, can now be forked by you. So you would move your pawn of pawns to here to fork it on your subsequent turn. However, if we look closer at the situation, we learn that by moving his rook into this square, he has now put you in check. Here's your king right here, so you are now in check by that rook. So if you're forced to move your pawn of pawns in this turn to here, you are thus leaving your king in check to be captured on the next piece. So if your king is the only king on the board, remember, if there's multiple kings on the board, then the kings can be captured until there's only one king left. But if this is the sole king on the board, you cannot leave it in check like this while moving the pawn. So in this case, moving your piece out of check would trump the obligation to move your pawn of pawns to the forking square. So in that case, you do not have to move the pawn of pawns to the forking square immediately. You can instead move your king out of check. And then if this fork remains, then on the next move, you would move your pawn of pawns to that piece. So that answers the first question. The second question was, what if you have a situation where, say, instead of this being the talia, say this is the minister. We know the minister moves one square diagonally. So when that fork arises, when you move your pawn of pawns to this square, on the next move, your pawn of pawns will just immediately get captured. Yes, and the answer is you still are bound to do it. Even if it means that your pawn of pawns, you will just lose the pawn, you are still bound to move it there when a fork arises. Another question is, what if, let's say a person's king is escaping, they want to get to their opponent's citadel, so that it wouldn't be that king, it'd be this king here. Let's say they want to get to their opponent's citadel to declare a draw, but here we have the opponent's camel, which moves the stretched knight move, which would move the 4 up and 1 over, would land in the citadel. So can the king still move in the citadel, even though the citadel is technically being attacked by this camel that would move over to there? And the answer is yes. The citadel square is immune. Even if it's currently under attack, technically, by the move of a piece, it's immune. That piece theoretically can't move in there, so the king can still move into the citadel even if it's under attack. The citadel square is under attack by opponent's piece because that is an immune square. Secondly, we said that if there's a piece sitting in the citadel, say you have your king, you brought your king into the citadel, and instead of declaring a draw, you've decided to switch with an adventitious king. This isn't an adventitious king, it's a dababa, but we'll put it there. Pretend this is your adventitious king. So this piece is sitting there, has switched with the king. The adventitious king has now gone in here, and say later in the game, the king is now captured, later in the game, taken away. Then we said in the rules that once that happens, whatever piece, the adventitious king or the prince, that now sits in the citadel must immediately move out to resume gameplay. Well, he does not have to immediately move out if doing so would put him in check. So here's the opponent's rook sitting right here. Of course, he's If he moved to here or here, moving out of the citadel now, that would put him in check. He obviously is not bound to move out immediately, if doing so would put him in check, obviously. So he can move. He has to move out immediately as soon as he can do so without putting himself in check. And yes, another question was the king switch rule. When a king goes in their opponent's citadel, the switch rule can only be used once. So if the king switches with either his prince or his adventitious king, then later in the game, if another piece like the prince comes in here, he can no longer use the switch rule. So the second time one of your kings enters the citadel, your only option is to declare a draw. The king switch can only be used once. Let's see. There was one more question, I think. And yes, if you have your king and your prince and your adventitious king all on the board, excuse me, and your king gets captured, and he had never entered the opponent's citadel, never used the switch option yet, and he just gets captured, then you're left with just your prince and your adventitious king on the board. And if the prince, the higher ranking of the two, goes into your opponent's citadel, say that's the prince, yes, he can then use the switch and switch with the adventitious king, because your highest ranking king never had used the switch yet. Remember, the king ranking is king, then prince, then adventitious king, and only the highest ranking of those three can enter the opponent's citadel. And remember, the adventitious king is the only of the three that can enter your own citadel in order to block your opponent from declaring a draw. And those are the answers to some of the questions that have come up since I have released the first 3 videos. I promised at the end of the last video that I would at some point make a shorter video summarizing everything from the first 3 videos, trying to shorten that 35-minute time span down to about 7 or 8 minutes, so you don't have to re-watch all 3 videos to remind yourself, refresh your memory of the rules. I'm going to keep that promise. I will make that summary video, hopefully coming out soon within the next couple weeks. And until then, thanks for watching, and hope you're enjoying Tamerlane chess.